Hello, everybody, and welcome to the final Fairy Tale Wiki Twitter Talk of 2021. It's been a while, but we're finally at the end of the road that we've been on for this year. We've had some very interesting guests in the past, and we wanted to close off with another one, so we invited our friend Andro on. Andro is a member of the Fairy Tale and Eden Zero Discord servers, started up by our former guest Spider-Man, and of course, he's a Fairy Tale fan as well. So let's welcome him on board. Andro, how are you, man?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. We really appreciate it. So, as you probably remember, our shtick is that we just jump right into it. So,
Yeah.
as a fan of Fairy Tale, how did you become a fan?
Actually, I became a fan of Fairy Tale by I got recommended one Nalu compilation on YouTube, and I was like, you know what, this Fairy Tale stuff seems pretty cool. So I started watching it. I forgot where I ended up watching it. But yeah, that was a few years back, and I eventually joined the server, and now here we are.
So, you started with the Fairy Tale anime, and you kind of just got involved in the community once you started looking up stuff. Would that be the general gist of it?
Yeah.
Awesome. What was the first thing about Fairy Tale which really, really appealed to you?
Just a very good question. I think the world was very interesting. The premise of the world itself, it was something where it's like, I guess it's not modern age. It's not really like medieval either. It's kind of like a weird mix between the two. And, the elements of magic also made it very interesting to where, like, they've always just had magic and it's something that's very common even for just normal people.
And you mentioned that it was a Nalu themed video.
Yes, it was a Nalu compilation.
So romantic.
Yes.
So how did you feel about the characters after you started watching the series?
I did really like the characters when I started watching this series. That was actually the first anime that I've ever watched, so I was pretty new to the entire, concept in general. Um, you know, I've heard, a lot of people criticizing Nalu as a main protagonist, and I think, some of those criticisms are valid, but I feel like there's not that many characters in Fairy Tale that are all that unlikable, unless if it's intentionally.
Would you say that you have a favorite character in the series?
Oh, I would definitely say Pret or Hades, I suppose you could say.
That's interesting and definitely not one of the answers I've ever heard before. Is there any particular reason for that?
I think he's just, he's a very stoic and cool character. I do like how, you see the character he was in Fairy Tail Zero, and, you actually see that his motivations for becoming, I suppose, bad are somewhat reasonable to an extent. He's very just interesting and, well thought out character, in my opinion.
Something that I remember a lot of fans at the time were not happy with when the manga came out back in, roughly 2011 when this happened was that they felt his death wasn't very good, especially considering how he'd been built up as a villain. What's your opinion on that?
His death, okay, so I feel like his death was somewhat earned, but I do like how, I feel like he was redeemed at the end to an extent, almost as if he saw the error of his ways and how he went about things.
You're referring to the Tartarus arc where he came back as a ghost, so to speak?
Yes, yes.
Now, you touched on it a little bit before, but you felt that there weren't too many unlikable characters in Fairy Tail unless they were unlikable by design. So, is there any in particular that you really dislike?
I do really dislike Jason, the sorcerer weekly guy, the cool guy. I've always found him a bit annoying.
It's interesting. He's definitely appeared more in filler than he has anything else, but I think there are people who would agree with you. Though that's interesting because that's also an opinion that I've never heard before.
I feel like, it wasn't like he was integral to the story or anything. I did like when he gave Lucy a job back in the 1 year time skip. That's pretty cool. But other than that, I've always just found him a bit annoying.
I think that's totally understandable. Now, we mentioned the plot and stuff like that. So, what would you say is your favorite story arc in the Fairy Tale series?
Actually, good question. I would have to say probably the Fairy Tale Zero arc, maybe the Tenro arc as well. Yeah,
Would this be because of the Hades Precht character, or was it a combination of multiple factors?
that would be a large reason. I think they're both of them were pretty, well thought out stories. The Tartarus arc was also pretty good.
And flipping that around a bit, what would you say is your least favorite arc in the series?
I would have to say, what is it, Cube Starry Heavens? That one for sure.
Yes, the famous anime filler arc.
Yes, yes.
I think that's quite understandable. I've definitely heard that answer before. People definitely think that it doesn't really make a lot of sense. And there's just a lot of very weird moments. I mean, I'm sure you remember things like the mayonnaise and the watermelon. It was
Yeah.
just a very unusual aspect, even by the standards of fairy tale.
I just remember it being super dragged out. Like I was just waiting for it to end. Basically, the fights were super long. You'd have some that would span like 4 or 5 episodes. And they just got to the point where you kind of got bored of it.
Yeah, anime filler in general like that is kind of weird. It's like they always seem to extend more than the canon fights, and I'm never 100% sure why, because you would think that they would prefer to extend the anime version of the manga fights, but apparently not.
I didn't even mind the Eclipse Spirit arc. I know the other filler arc that also gets a lot of hate. I wasn't crazy about it, but I definitely like didn't hate it as much as the Starry Heaven arc.
Oh, my mistake right there, because that's the one that has the mayonnaise.
Mm,
Fair enough. Though I can certainly get behind the key of the Starry Sky Arc because that also has its own set of issues, and it was kind of folded into the canon of the manga in a kind of a weird way, given the changes with the a Russian says Dark Guild.
yeah, it was it it was weird how it kind of meshed together. Wasn't it in between the 7 year time skip and the Grand Magic games?
Definitely. So, taking all this that we've talked about when it comes to Fairy Tale, I want to ask you if there was any particular thing in Fairy Tale that you could change if you had the option of doing so, be it the original series or even 100 Year Quest, which we'll probably talk about later if you've read it. What would that thing be?
That's actually a very good question. I would have to say, the overall overuse of fan service, I think in a lot of cases it just detracts from the story.
Definitely an answer I've heard before. I mean, I think most fans are okay with it to a certain extent, but when you've got really important scenes taking place while all the characters are sitting naked in a spa, or Lucy's scene with like the legends of the flying naked people, I believe Natsu called it's like, what the hell, man? That's just not important right now.
There's some certain jokes that are, entertaining, but then you have those like entire episodes, like that one episode in the Grand Magic Games arc where they have like this swimsuit contest or something. It was just something where it's like it's just unnecessary. It detracts too much from the actual story.
And in that particular case, takes away from Mira Jane as a character.
Exactly, yeah. Yeah.
So on the flip side of that, what do you think is the thing that Fairy Tale does best? Now you've mentioned before that the world building was what attracted you to the series, but would you say that's its best aspect, or is it something different?
I would say that to an extent. I know the power of friendship motif gets criticized a lot, but I do like the, original intention behind it. Just the concept of, sticking by your friends and whatnot, loyalty being very important.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's something a lot of fans would agree with, that they love that stuff. And sure, like in specific moments, power of friendship and the like is very much overused and unnecessary. But as a simple idea, it's something that people can get behind.
Yeah, totally agree.
So now I want to talk to you a little bit about the Fairy Tale fandom. So as I mentioned in the intro, you're a member of the Fairy Tale Need Zero Discord server. This was started up by Spider-Man, who was a previous guest. So A, how did you get into the server? And B, what has your experience been so far?
I actually got into the server through the Reddit because I used Reddit quite a lot back in the day. Um, the fandom in general, there's some really good people on there. There's, you'll have your creep every once in a while that is like, oh yes, I love the fairy tale girls. Who would win in a bikini battle between Urza and Lucy in a mud pit? I must know. You'll have some of those kind of people sometimes. It's a little bit off putting and you'll have some crazy people every once in a while. But I would say, overall it's a really great group of people.
So has there been any particular incident in the server that you thought was like, damn, this is why I want to be a part of this server. I love these guys, or something to that effect?
That's actually a very good question. I would say, the times where we're just having, a heart to heart conversation. Like I've made a lot of great friends on that server and just talking to people in DMs and whatnot. And, really getting down to, very even just personal issues, just talking to them in general. It really is like fairy tale in a way where, friendship it goes above all. And, it is really touching, even on an online community, how friendly you can get with some people.
It's very true. It's my experience, certainly with the Fairy Tale Wiki way back when. but I've heard a lot of great things about the Fairy Tale Reddit. I know Spider-Man in particular worked very hard to get it up to date and make it a community that people like to be part of. And it sounds like he's been doing a very good job of that.
Yes, that man works very hard.
Yeah, we're going to stop talking about him now because I don't want to inflate his ego any further. But suffice it to say that, we thank you, Spidey.
Right. Can't we have his ego going too high?
Absolutely not. So, on the topic of the Fairy Tale Discord server, obviously it's very big. It's over 10,000 members at this point, probably a little bit more if I go in and check the particular numbers. But I'm curious, since it's so big right now, if somebody new were to come in and say like, "Hey, I'm new here. You know, what can I do to become part of the community?" How would that person go about it?
It's a very inviting community. Like, most of the time when there's people active on the servers, even when someone just joins, you'll have, a brigade of people just welcoming them. It's a very easy community to get into. I got into it about a year and a half ago. It was a bit different back then. I suppose you got to know people individually a bit better, but even now, when the size has grown, I would say 9 or 10 times to what it was when I joined, it's still a very easy community to integrate into, and very welcoming.
Yeah, from the occasional time that I've jumped in, everyone always seems to be very nice and they're always having really good discussions and getting along and sharing their mutual interests and projects. So I think they've done a very good job of making it a community where everyone can kind of come together and talk about, a different common interest.
Exactly. It's a very non-toxic place, I suppose is the best way I could put it.
Awesome. So now on the topic of interests, I want to note that once I announced that you were going to be the next guest, Spider Man actually replied to our tweet on Twitter with a little list of your intros and your likes and dislikes, stuff like that. So let's change the topic away from Fairy Tale a little bit and talk about you. What are some of your interests aside from Fairy Tale, be they other anime or other forms of media in general?
Well, I think most everyone in the server already knows I'm a big Star Wars fan. Very passionate about it.
Oh yeah, well let's go into a little detail about it. What parts do you like? What parts do you dislike? Let's shoot the breeze.
I primarily like the Clone Wars era. I love that. The sequel era, it's not as great as, many Star Wars fans would tell you, but the series as a whole, it's just fantastic.
This might be tangentially related, but I'm just curious. Does your name Andro Data come from Star Trek?
It is not, no. Actually, the admin on the Fairy Tale server right now is, trying really hard to get me to watch the Star Trek Next Generation series. I've never really gotten into Star Trek, but, I'm gonna be doing that this summer when I'm not bombarded by schoolwork, so that should be fun.
Yeah, it was just like it just seemed like it would fit, so I wasn't certain about that. And then you said you like Star Wars. I'm like, well, maybe, but I'm not certain, so I may as well ask, right?
Like Spock, he's very cool.
Yeah, he's definitely popular. I was thinking like the next generation character Data, played by Brent Spiner. He's really interesting. I haven't actually watched Star Trek: The Next Generation, but I've heard good things about it. I watched a little bit, and it seems good. I saw one of the movies, and I thought that was really good too.
Yeah, yeah, seems like a good series.
So, turning our attention to anime, what are some other anime besides Fairy Tail and Eden Zero that you're into?
I'm not gonna lie, I haven't seen very many animes at all. One of the animes that one of the past mods, Jinx actually got me into was Black Lagoon. That one's fantastic. I highly recommend that if you haven't seen it already. Air got me to watch a bit of JoJo's. It was pretty good, but it was a bit wacky for my taste. Let's see. There was also this other one. I forgot what it was. It's called Fruit Basket. It was one of those more like slice of life animes, I guess. I'm not that crazy into those, but yeah, Black Lagoon's fantastic.
I have seen a little bit of Black Lagoon, and from what little I've seen, I would agree it was very good in terms of its opening episodes, at least. So I could definitely get behind you there. I'm curious about the JoJo's part because Spider-Man did say you were actually a big fan, and he literally listed that as one of your qualifications as to why you should be on this particular episode. So I was like, oh well, if he's not a huge fan, what are you telling me, Spidey?
He actually put on the little poster that one of my achievements was watching JoJo's. I only finished
Yes.
part 2, I think. Yeah, bit of part 3.
Oh well, I mean there's quite a few parts to that series. It's one that I've never personally got into, but everybody apparently loves the hell out of it.
Yeah, fair enough. I do want to get into Attack on Titan this summer as well. That seems very good.
Yeah, I've watched some of that. I do like it as well. To the extent that I've seen it, I'm not up to date. I'm probably not even at the halfway mark, if I'm being quite honest. But I've heard very good things about it, and I like the stuff that I've seen before. And the manga is over, so yeah.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah.
So Andrew, that was really all my burning questions for you. I'd like to just open this up. Is there anything you would like to talk about, or anything you want to discuss?
I'd be willing to discuss anything really.
Well, I don't think we touched on it, but have you been reading the Fairy Tale 100 Year Quest manga?
I have not actually. I meant to do it more than a year ago, but I never got around to doing so. And I figured at this point I might as well wait for the anime.
Fair enough. I think that it is a little bit far in. We're at over 70 chapters at this point. So if you wanted to jump into it, it wouldn't be too much of a climb. But I think it's understandable if you want to just wait for the anime. Speaking of anime, though, the Eden Zero anime did debut several weeks ago. I'm curious, have you been watching that? And if so, what were your thoughts?
Not yet, actually. I'm not even sure the dub has come out, which is what I usually watch. But very interested to start getting into that. It looks like a very interesting concept.
I haven't seen the anime myself, though I did like the trailer that I saw, and the animation looked pretty good. I probably would watch the sub, and I believe the sub is currently available, but I think you're right. It's not one of those anime that has a simul dub, as far as I'm aware.
I think the dub should come out a little bit later, to my understanding. Um, but yeah, it seems like it. From what I've heard about the series, I haven't watched it or read it, but it seems to pick up on a lot of the places that Fairy Tale kind of failed, in my opinion. Like it's a bit darker. You're gonna have some actual suspense at some points. That was also one of my big issues with Fairy Tale. Now that we go back to it, you know, I know this gets criticized a lot, but the lack of actual suspense, I suppose you could say, the fake out deaths and whatnot.
Yeah, definitely something I've heard before. There's a lot of examples you could point out to, Mira Jane, Makarov, Urza in certain cases. You can definitely criticize Mishima for that. It's understandable that he doesn't want to kill the characters, but at the same time, it's like if you don't want to kill the characters, maybe stop doing all the fake out deaths because eventually, when you do it, you're kind of going to lose the interest and respect of your audience.
Right. Especially Makarov. I'm sure there's been at least five, maybe at least 10 times where, he's been, there's been a death scare and it's just like, oh no, he's fine. A little bit of time in the med bay with Polyusica and it'll be fine.
Yeah, I don't know if it's quite 10 times, but there's definitely quite a lot of times that it's happened. I tweeted out maybe a month ago on the Fairy Tale Twitter. What's the Fairy Tale Guild going to do? Are we going to appoint and keep a new guild master, or are we going to give the job to Makarov again? And it's like, well, we're always going to give the job to Makarov again.
Yeah. I love Makarov though. He's a very good character.
I certainly liked him in his debut. I think he's very well suited to be the guild master. But in terms of like the fake out deaths, and I'm sure many other fans would agree with you. And in terms of fans, Andrew, thank you again for coming on. Really appreciate you being here to talk about the server, your experiences with Fairy Tale, and help us close off this season of Fairy Tale Wiki Twitter Talk.
Yeah. Great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here again. And listeners, thank you all for being here. I really appreciate that you guys take the time out of your week to listen to our episodes. I know they're not terribly long, and you can just put them on while you're doing your homework or doing a little bit of whatever else it is you guys do in your free time. But this is what Fairy Tale Wiki Twitter Talk is all about. As I consistently say, we want to get to know our followers on Twitter. We want to get to know people in the Fairy Tale community. We want to put ourselves out there and create a little bit of entertaining content for you guys to consume, because that's what got us all into Fairy Tale in the first place. Getting to know a cast of characters that we really like, and by extension, getting to know a fandom of people that we really like, who all share a common interest, who are open and are willing to talk to us about whatever is on their mind. And I think to a large extent that we've actually succeeded in that. This is what Fairy Tale Wiki was about, providing that kind of information. This is what Fairy Tale Reddit is about, trying to provide a forum for discussion. And I think to the extent that I've been a member of one or the other, we're doing a good job, and I hope that we continue to do that job. So, guys, again, thank you very much for being a part of this over the last 2 years. We're definitely going to do this again next year, if assuming no major changes to anybody's lives. I hope that you guys, if you've been interested so far, will apply. Please check out our other videos on our channel. We've got a lot of other interviews with a lot of very interesting people from the past, and we're going to have more in the future. Please subscribe to keep up to date. But until then, thank you guys for listening. This has been Fairy Tale Wiki Twitter Talk of 2021, and we hope you all have a great day.